About what you make of we were listening to the White House press conference a moment ago. You're in Washington, and the press secretary comparing Donald Trump to Winston Churchill.
That is a hilariously inapt comparison. I think what we're beginning to see, and I am, as you know, videoing in from Washington, D.C., the air is full of helicopters. There are sirens constantly. We're seeing President Trump attempt to promote himself as a tough guy, as the leader of putting down these protests. But he seems to have yet to realize that there's a difference between tough and strong, and a difference between play acting and actual leadership. And although there are still people in his administration, his spokesperson in particular, who are willing to play along with this game, we're seeing many others break off. The chief of the Pentagon has said that he does not support bringing in the military or troops to quell these protests. Others are finally taking a stance and saying that what the president has said is in fact inflaming the violence and contributing to the atmosphere that both leads police officers to believe that they can act with impunity, and frankly is making the population extremely angry, extremely discontented, and angry enough in this moment to take to the streets. Trump is not helping. If anything, he is trying to hurt in hopes that continued fear and unrest will inflame his base for the November election. I'm not so sure he's going to win this one.
Yeah, we were just showing some video, Steve, as Christine was talking, of the president who left the White House, went to that church right nearby, was sort of holding up the Bible. And we know that law enforcement had to be called in to clear the area for this video to be sent out to show the president there in front of that church. I'm just curious, when you hear talk about, the Insurrection Act, and the president has the absolute right to use that, and the National Guard will be called in if the states can't get control of this. Fortunately, things look like they are getting calmer, and if that continues, it may not be necessary. But the use of that language, sort of the law and order approach, if you will, by this president.
Well, and there are two, I think, points here. First of all, with respect to this image of a law and order president, you do not see in this presidency an effort that remotely resembles the way that presidents have handled national crises in the past. Whether we're talking about George W. Bush or Barack Obama or other presidents earlier in time, they sought to draw the country together in times of crisis. They sought to de-escalate. You are not seeing that with this president, who decides a soundbite is more important than coming up with an image of trying to bring the country back together. It would be, going back to this comparison to Winston Churchill, as if Winston Churchill said, well, half the country is going to stop the Germans when they come across the channel, but the other half we can't count on them because they're fake news.
Yeah, no, interesting point. And Christine, also, when some people in your country start to perceive the president as part of the problem in the middle of an election year, 5 months from an actual presidential vote, then what?
Then what indeed? I think that this summer is really going to be a turning point. I certainly hope it will be a turning point. I mean, we have to remember that it was in February, just a month before the coronavirus began to be a real problem on our shores, that the Republican Party refused to impeach President Trump, saying, in fact, that they thought that he was a fit president. In the weeks and months since then, everything has gone sharply downhill. I think the entire country is beginning to recognize that. First, his historically chaotic non-management of the coronavirus pandemic, then, of course, his mishandling of this situation, exactly as my co-panelist has said, rather than seeking to bring the country together for a moment of unity in what are obviously trying times.
Yeah.
It's very hard to pull us apart.
Yeah, and you are a columnist for the Washington Post, so this is going to get ugly over the next couple of months here. And the president today sending out a tweet, Christine, about Joe Biden and saying, look, I've done more for Black Americans than Joe Biden has done, in 43 years in office, going after Joe Biden amid all of this now. So I'm curious about that strategy. What do you think he's trying to do?
Yeah, it's an interesting strategy, and I'm not sure how well it's going to work for him. The thing is, as we see with Trump's tweets, as we see him trying to inflame a new situation every day rather than allow attention to be drawn to his failures, this is beginning to be very clearly a failure, and he will do anything to draw attention elsewhere. whether it's bringing Joe Biden to the fore, whether creating a trumped up crisis with some other country. The thing is here, Joe Biden is actually the number one choice for Black voters at this moment. Joe Biden is seen as an electable alternative to Donald Trump with longer ties to the Black community. In fact, this tweet from Trump is not in any way to Black voters. It is to assure his white base, frankly, that he has said something ostensibly non-racist and they can continue to support him. I don't think that Black voters are going to be deceived. I don't think that many people are going to be deceived. Trump is just trying to draw our attention in a different direction before the election.
Christine Emba joining us from Washington. She's a columnist with the Washington Post. Thanks so much for that, Christine. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.